Should the victims of American imperialism be grateful to America? If you were Jewish and observant and a Torah Jew, you would have no hesitation in agreeing with this proposition that the victims of American imperialism should be grateful to America, because it is the practice of Jews, not that it was something that you this is not something most people know, but basically Jews are supposed to thank God even for misfortune. So if you were a Jew properly following the Torah and religious and observant, you would know what I'm on about. Sadly, most Jews are not observant or righteous or principled. And I think they have largely forgotten how they are supposed to regard misfortune. But you can still find bits of information here and there about Jews saying we only have to obey, we are not to question God, who moves in mysterious ways. Christians have been known to say this too. And this is the whole idea. We submit ourselves to not knowing God's mind because we are only, lowly and ignorant and cannot presume to know what God's intentions are. And we can only look upon misfortune as a learning experience. And it is actually true. People talk about learning from their mistakes and not repeating them and avoiding them in the future, and maybe evolving a strategy or inventing something to solve the problem. So America is a problem to its victims. Muslims would feel themselves to be particular victims of America because they have their oil and America wants to control it. So in terms of our personal individual existences, we would presumably measure our success by how much pleasure and status we enjoy through our property, our beauty, our career, our talent, ambition, etc. But what about those who live in Gaza, for example? Some of us occasionally think of them and are grateful not to be a Gazan. Muslims get angry at Jews. And what do they expect Jews to do? I was discussing this with someone earlier. What do people realistically expect Jews to say? I suppose they could say, we don't agree with American foreign policy. We are not Zionists, that we be Jews. But what about Jews who live in Israel? That would be a totally different proposition, because Israel depends on America for its arms, its Iron Dome, all that sort of thing. But if they were to dig a bit deeper, they would realize that they have been put there, these Jews in Israel, have been put there to people the American colony that is Israel. So Israel is really an American colony, and as such, its usefulness to Jewish interests is dubious. Well, if you're the sort of Jew who doesn't think um, Israel should exist, like the Neturei Charta, then you might think that the secular state of Israel is doing Jews more harm than good. It's making them even more hated. But then, as a Jew, you would say, they've always hated us. It doesn't matter what we do, whether we're weak or strong, they'll always hate us. But it has been said by the chief rabbi of Iran that the secular state of Israel is nothing to do with Judaism. I don't know why he didn't go on to say that the secular state of Israel is, in fact, harmful to Jews. But then he's also an American citizen. And I guess he can't say too much about American policy as an American citizen. Isn't it strange, though, that I think, what's his name? The chief rabbi of Iran, his name is, I think, Yehudi Karami, something like that. He's a young man, chief rabbi of Iran. So he's an interesting fellow, Yehuda Garami. And he's held this position since 2011. Wikipedia isn't quite sure about his age, but he was born in either 1983 or 1984. So I think this is a problem with religions, that there are religious symbols that people not necessarily friendly to that religion or its adherents use to promote their thing, their label. It's a label, it's a symbol, it's a mascot. And people who don't care to dig too deep because they can't be bothered, they have a short attention span, are really quite happy with the official story. Because, well, if it's official, a lot of people support it, and certainly powerful people support it. But I do ask, what is a Jew to do if he... Would you expect a Jew to say, I'm not a Zionist? Then, of course, he would be accused of disloyalty. He could say, I don't agree with Israel's policy of exterminating the Gazans. But the point is, really, not many people care. So we go back to the Holocaust and the Germans under the Nazis. At some level, well, something's going on. The Jews have been rounded up. They've been put on trains, being put somewhere for who knows what purpose. And, well, stuff is going on in Gaza, and the Gazans are being killed and or being redistributed throughout the American global empire. But what is one to do to show one cares? We could be saying things at Glastonbury, as Bob Villain was doing. How will that help? When we already know that European leaders are in fact obliged to support the American position on Israel, which is that it is, just because it's a liberal democracy, it is by definition one of the good guys. and we're all good, the good guys, aren't we? It's the unspoken message. Because we are liberal democracies, we are the good guys. Because if you keep digging deeper into government policy, all government policies, all policies of all governments in calling itself Western, we will know that there is no real deviation from support of Zionism. But then, if you're going to ask a Jew if he's a Zionist, then how could he get round that if he were minded to do so? If he felt uneasy about Israeli military and foreign policy. I mean, can we as individuals, could the Germans really dissociate themselves from Nazi Germany? Can they? I don't think we really can. We're all going to be tarred with the same brush of possibly Sodom and Gomorrah. I don't know how many non-Sodomites there were in Sodom and Gomorrah, but I think there were not even as many as 10. But let's assume that there are a bit, more, there are a few more people in the West who don't agree with Western foreign policy, or even Western domestic policy, or even if you're not Western. Let's imagine a time when, some kingdom, some ancient kingdom did something, and, as an ordinary person, what could you do? What could you do to stop that war, or stop, whatever it was that is historically considered to be the wrong thing? We can think of the Aztecs, we can think of the Pharaoh who didn't want Moses and his people to leave Egypt because he wanted to have a labor force to build his pyramids. What could we as individuals do when we don't agree with government policy? Well, you would have thought the least we could do is demonstrate and say we don't agree. And, obviously try and get everyone else who's prepared to listen to agree with us. But ultimately, it will be a test of our system. So if we didn't like what was going on, we could have, what could we do really? Vote? Does any Western country allow people to vote on foreign policy? Do people even think of foreign policy when they're voting? I think they only care about the, as they used to call it, the price of beer and cigarettes, and a pint of milk, or a basket of groceries. People only care about these bread and butter issues that only affect them as consumers and citizens. Foreign policy is too complicated, too abstract, too specialized for people who don't even understand their own history. Do Westerners understand their own history? I would suggest to you that they do not, and that is why they are so capable of such folly. Why don't they understand their own history? Well, because it's not taught. It's not taught properly. It's not taught in the same way from generation to generation. Therefore, different generations of a family will have a completely different view of their own history. But back to the Jews again. If you were an observant Jew, if you did go to lectures of your rabbis, you would be familiar with the characters that keep popping up in their readings of the Torah that come in cycles. They're at a certain time of the year. You start at the beginning from Genesis, and then you keep going until you get to the end of the year. We are now approaching the end of the year. Some of you may even know that the Jewish year actually is our academic year, sometime in September, October, that sort of time, and that's when their year begins, which is around Yom Kippur. So they have a slightly different calendar, but then in a way Gentiles have adopted it. They begin the academic year at the same time as Jews begin their new year on Rosh Hashanah. So many things we have adopted are in fact Jewish. Even the practice of scapegoating Jews, that's also Jewish, as well as the academic year, as the idea of codifying our religion into the Ten Commandments. Obviously, it's very useful because you can't be expected to read the entire scripture, but you can remember off the top of your head, the 5 pillars of Islam, the 7 Noahide laws, the 10 commandments, the 13 principles of Judaism. These are manageable numbers for us to remember things. And essentially, the trouble in the Middle East is caused by the West, instigated by America. So that's why I keep going back to America and the Jews. And if we think of it in terms of a religious, ideological war, it becomes certainly more manageable. And if we understand that Jewish Zionism is in fact impossible if Jews did it on their own, because really when you think about it, Jews are only about 1% of the total human population. So unless they had the support of powerful Gentile empires, they're not going to get a homeland. So when Jews were living in the Ottoman Empire before the British took over the Palestine Mandate, that powerful empire was Muslim. And then the British took the Palestine Mandate from the declining Ottoman Empire and thought that they finally made it. They got to administer the Holy Land, and this is the prize of all global empires, to manage the Holy Land. And if you look at British history, or even the imperial poem that is William Blake's Jerusalem, which was later translated into turned into an imperial hymn, you will see that it was a project that has spanned centuries, and they're not going to give it up, because as long as people still believe in God, or want to pretend to believe in God, their activities would center around the peoples and territories of the adherents of the Abrahamic religions. which are Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And Judaism, being the religion of only 1% of the total human population, cannot stand on its own. So it will have to look either to Christians or to Muslims to give them their homeland. And that is how I propose to simplify this very complicated and long-standing religious dispute that has gone on for centuries, in the form of theological arguments as well as Western foreign policy. So if Jews were to go to Gentiles to give them a homeland, it would have to go to them. They would have to go to the most powerful Gentile empire, and it is currently still the West. And therefore, its Zionism would not be Jewish Zionism as such, but Christian Zionism. Could there be Muslim Zionism? Well, it could be argued, and I certainly do argue this, that Allah is himself a Zionist, because the Quran does talk about Jews and where they are to live. So the Quran refers to the time when God told Moses to dwell in the promised land, and also mentions where he expects Jews to go in the end times. If they're not already there, they are to go there to await further instructions, presumably. So no one can really deny that God, if he exists, mentions Jews a lot in his messages to humanity. So the problem seems to be with Muslims, and I think ultimately that they have to take responsibility. Why can't they? Well, if you're upset about the Gazans and how they're being treated, why aren't Muslims doing a bit more? But instead, these Sunnis hate on Iran because presumably the Western imperialists, who are very skilled propagandists, have divided them and told them to hate Iran and Shias. And stupidly, they happily hate. And so it does not appear at the moment that there is any kind of Muslim unity. But all this could end if they were being sensible. But then I don't think a lot of them are trying to be sensible. They're, like everyone else, trying to pretend that they haven't made any mistakes. And so if you don't admit that you've made any mistakes, there's nothing to correct, is it? Is there? And if you deny that you are ill, you won't be seeking a cure, so you won't get better. So what does the American empire have to do with any of this? I am suggesting that if the American empire were to adopt Quranic principles of governance in its domestic and foreign policy, then all these problems would be solved in, well, very quickly anyway. I can't give you a time scale, but all these solutions are already contained in the Quran. So let us say America adopted Sharia. It means Israel will adopt Sharia. Or if the Israelis cried out for Sharia and conducted a referendum and lived under Sharia, what do you think is going to happen to the rest of the West? They're going to follow suit. So it doesn't matter whether America does it or Israel does it. It would just happen. It would be like if you're thinking of a family. It doesn't matter whether mum does something and then dad does it, or the other way around. If they both do it, then if they both follow the other, then the children will be doing it. I suppose you could think of it in terms of choosing a holiday destination and agreeing on it, and then the children have to come, whether they like it or not. So why aren't the Muslims doing a bit more to argue their case? I've suggested that they could get on the bandwagon of Zionism, since it's actually unreasonable to expect any Jew of all groups to say that they don't deserve a homeland. Why would you say you don't deserve a homeland when you have the backing of the world's #1 superpower? Well, even the Kurds would say they want a homeland. So why would you expect Jews to say they don't want one or don't deserve one? So if Muslims conceded the principle that Jews are mentioned in the Quran, sometimes not in flattering terms, but there is no suggestion that God wanted them exterminated or that he expects them to disappear, because he does say in the end times, in chapter 17, verse 104, he does expect them to be still in existence. Sadly, I can't get any sense out of these Muslims who won't have a civilized discussion about chapter 17, verse 104. So I'm saying to them that they are part of the problem. I'm happy to see Mike Malzahn. I'm going to invite him to join me. So I'm saying the reason why the Gazans suffer is because the Muslims are being utterly moronic and not using the arguments that I would be using if I were Muslim, but I'm not Muslim, so nobody listens to me. They don't like what I am proposing because it's not in harmony with how they have been interpreting their own book for centuries. But I never claimed to be Muslim. I'm certainly not going to interpret their Quran in their incorrect way as I see it. So that's why they won't talk to me, and that's why they won't talk to you, Mike. Hopefully they will relent, because you're the super troll of Muslim YouTube channels. Now, I'll read your comment. No, not the actual victims, but some of their descendants should be happy of the advances America has brought. Well, yes. I'm saying the founding of America was, I don't know why it hasn't been presented in this way. It's probably because of the British monarchy. But really, the founding of the American Republic is obviously a rejection of the institution of monarchy. And this is confirmed in the French Revolution and reconfirmed in the Russian Revolution. And but you would expect the Europeans not to want to talk about it very much, because we know that the French Revolution was a very scary thing for all the absolute monarchs of Europe. And absolute monarchy didn't end until the year 1918, when the Austrian and German emperors had to abdicate because World War I went so badly for them, and also when the Russian royal family was completely exterminated, and that was the Russian way of saying, we don't want even the possibility of the monarchy ever being restored in Russia. We're going to be a republic from now on, and it'll be for keeps. So what is better? Which is better, a republic or a kingdom? There are clues in the Bible, and also in Jewish history, because the Jews have had terrible kings. And it's not just the Jews who've had terrible kings, the Chinese have had terrible kings, and so have Muslims and Christians. So the institution of monarchy is, well, prone to abuse and the antithesis of a meritocracy. Because if you put it in this way, then everybody who has any sense of justice will say, I want to live in a meritocracy. And what is the antithesis of a meritocracy? It would be the monarchy. Because a monarchy is about who is your dad, and not your personal merit. And it is for this thing, for this statement of this proposition nation, that we should all be grateful to America for making this point. Sadly, many Americans have forgotten this, and disturbingly, many of them seem to want a king, because I guess they're tired of their presidents not really doing anything much. So what is the problem of America, of American presidents not doing what they're supposed to do as far as people are concerned? And I keep saying, please just read George Washington's farewell speech, and it'll all become clear. And you don't have to take my word for anything I say, but if you would read Washington's speech, you will be able to deduce that a lot of this advice has not been followed, in particular the one about not having political parties. So really the problem is a kind of global denialism of one's mistakes. I think really that's a problem. So in theory it could easily be solved, because we all want to think that we are capable of correction, and that we would like to have the virtue of humility, so that we can admit that we're wrong without too much ado when it is proven that we are wrong. So if the American Republic were capable of correcting itself, then I think so would everyone else be capable of correction, particularly when the West still retains so much prestige in their media. Mike says, the Salafi are anti-nation state. Also, they want Islam to rule the world. So why would the Jews have a self-ruled nation homeland? Yeah, I just don't understand why they talk about Islam being anti-nation. Because if you look at chapter 49, verse 13, and I did have a look at it yesterday, it does quite clearly say that God created, hold on, I'm going to find it for you. I'm going to read all 7 translations of it. Maybe I should share the screen with you. Okay. It's not a long verse, fortunately. O mankind, indeed, this is Sahih International. O mankind, indeed, we have created you from male and female and made you peoples and tribes, that you may know one another. Indeed, the most noble of you in the sight of Allah is the most righteous of you. Indeed, Allah is knowing and acquainted. See? So it says peoples, tribes. Pictal translation says, O mankind, lo, we have created you male and female and have made you nations and tribes, that ye may know one another. Lo, the noblest of you in the sight of Allah is the best in conduct. Lo, Allah is knower, aware. Yusuf Ali, we created you from a single pair of a male and female and made you into nations and tribes, that ye may know each other, not that ye may despise each other. Verily, the most honored of you in the sight of Allah is the most righteous of you. Shakir translation. We have created you of a male and a female and made you tribes and families that you may know each other. Tribes and families. But really, nations are composed of tribes, are they not? Muhammad Salwa, people, we have created you all male and female and have made you nations and tribes so that you would recognize each other. So I'm afraid, there's a lot of nationalism in here, in the sense that, well, God is talking about nations. Mohsin Khan translation. O mankind, we have created you from a male and female and made you into nations and tribes that you may know one another. Finally, Arbery translation. We have created you male and female and appointed you races and tribes that you may know one another. So there you go. Oh, I forgot to share the screen, never mind. You get the idea. I will post the link in the chat in case anybody is interested. Oh, Mike is here. Hooray.
Hey, Claire.
Hi, Mike.
Sorry, you were saying you were going to invite me on. I went downstairs to get a drink and go to the bathroom. Then when I came back, I heard you reading my comment. 4913, often quoted, mostly by Muslims to say they're not racist. But the establishment of a caliphate would eliminate all nations within it. I mean, there's obviously governorships and whatnot, but the idea that the Jews would have a standalone homeland, especially in the Holy Land, over Al-Aqsa Mosque, I don't think most Muslims would go for.
Well, I think people should just make a distinction between what is in theory possible, and what people want or what they think is possible. So as far as I know, a caliphate is a contiguous piece of land. So
Right.
I think there was a time when there were two caliphates competing against each other, and so we can only conclude that there were two rival Muslim empires. And
Sure, the Shia had caliphates that the Sunnis were. I think Solomon went down into Egypt to attack the Fatimids at one point.
mhm,
Obviously, had the Malamute revolt out of Egypt, where the slave class took over. I mean, I imagine there were more than two caliphates at one time. Quite often, Timur was a caliphate who sacked Baghdad. He was claimed to be a great grandson of Genghis Khan. When the Mongols came out, and some of them started converting to Islam and establishing their own caliphates and whatnot, they would kill other Muslims. Obviously, the Shia Sunni thing. The Alawites, had to flee
mhm,
Egypt. The Druze came into place at the end of the 10th century, and under the Mad Caliphate, he was a Shia. He's the guy who destroyed the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in 1009. But he
mhm.
Druze, and then when he disappeared one night, he used to go out for a horse ride at midnight, and he didn't come back. His nephew took over, and he drove the Druze out of Egypt, and that's how they ended up, in the Levant.
Hmm. I mean, I would consider the caliph a kind of pope, right? You know, he's the supreme leader of all the Muslims in the world, and he has political and military and moral power, and you would expect, and as you've confirmed, there would be rival Islamic empires claiming this supreme status, and eventually one of them had to one of them faded away, and so basically that's all it means. But who would be the um, who would be the caliphate? And obviously it would have to be the most powerful Islamic republic, who will eventually defeat all the rival claimants. It's sort of like if you want to be world heavyweight boxing champion, you'd have to fight all those people, and there'd be all these different heavyweight championships, and then you have this sort of unifying title fight, and
Right.
then you become undisputed world heavyweight champion, and this, I guess, is how it's done. So I guess I'm trying to put it to you, an American, that if America were to adopt Sharia, you would become the caliphate very quickly, which is quite prestigious, isn't it?
Well, it depends on again your secular Koranism. I don't think will be bought by the Sunnis. Your lack of
They
big
don't matter because they're just a leaderless bunch of people, and they can't agree on anything. But
right, right,
that would not be the case for America, because you have your constitution, you have your president, and you can still do lots of things. And there's no need to be so modest, Mike.
right.
It could
But
be done in theory.
but the idea that we would then unify the rest of the Muslims. Let's say we all agree with you, and we say, okay, we're going to become Muslims. We take our shahadas, but we're going to do this secular Koranism, where we keep our president and our Supreme Court and our checks and balances. Are we then supposed to, spread that to the rest of the world?
People are just going to follow in your wake anyway. Everybody just apes the Americans because they're so powerful and so wealthy, and we love their TV and we love their fast food. So you don't even have to ask us. They'll just come poodling on, following in your wake, because they would do it to whichever is the most powerful country in the world. And currently all eyes are on you. So and then you would have your own interpretation, your enlightened and liberal interpretation, and then you can reassert your
I don't know.
hegemony.
I don't know if the Chinese are just going to fall in line, or the Russians, or the current Islamic world. Maybe Western Europe. I doubt the Hungarians would. Orban would. I think he's a Christian nationalist. The Eastern Orthodox Church, I don't think, would just fall
But
in
most
line.
Europeans are so godless anyway. But I mean, the Europeans
Right.
I guess, had a worse time than the Americans, because I think you'll find more religion or Christian hating Europeans than Americans, because I mean, I know you have the Salem witch trials, but you know, it's sort of kind of quaint to you, I guess. But you know, Europeans were burnt at the stake for, you know, during the wars of the Reformation. They had the Inquisition and the European wars of religion, and
The 100-Year Wars, the 30-Year Wars. There's paintings of Protestants being beheaded in Paris. Like, I forget that one painting I saw. They're like just chopping Protestants' heads off to Catholics. You know.
oh yes, the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre. I guess it's closer to their minds, and that's why they're sort of, you know, more church hating, and why their cathedrals are empty. Well, you know, for Americans, it's a kind of cathedral. Sorry, a cultural affiliation. So I guess you go to church to be with, you know, other people like you, and you know, I guess that's. Well, I don't
Yeah.
know. I think you have had a different experience of religion, of Christianity, even.
You mean me
But that's
personally?
probably because it wasn't forced on you, right? But it was forced on the average European.
Right. Well, we quickly separated religious governance from religious life, and so yeah, you know, we didn't persecute the Quakers anymore. You know, we were founded
But
actually on the story that the Pilgrims came to Plymouth Rock to escape religious persecution out of Europe. So, you know,
yeah, and then
once
they
again,
arrived and persecuted each other anyway.
right, right. But 100 years later, by then or 200 years later, well, I guess 100, but, you know, and then Jefferson's, you know, has a famous letter where I think he's writing to the Baptists or something saying, you know, well, we can't tax you to build a Catholic church, or, you know, that wouldn't be fair.
Mm.
So you guys still, even the French with their lite, right? The French rebuilt Notre Dame, right? The government, they like the church is still kind of a government institution in France, even though they claim to be secular. They prop up the churches. I think it's bad that we allow churches to go untaxed, but other than that, you know, even the National Cathedral in DC was privately funded, and I think it's a Presbyterian church or something. It's not really a national cathedral. They just call it that because it's in DC.
Yes, I was talking to E. Michael Jones, and he was telling me about the anti-Catholic riots, the nativitist riots in Pennsylvania. I think he mentioned that,
Yeah, like
against
100 years
Catholics.
ago or something. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
the Protestants were pretty anti-Catholic. I mean, when Kennedy got elected president, that was a huge thing. That, you know, how could we elect this Catholic? You know, the idea was, and he had to defend himself and say, "Listen, I'm not going to take orders from the Pope." You know, I don't think anybody thinks that they will now. But back then, they were still like, "Well, we don't want to elect this Catholic guy. He's going to do whatever the Pope tells him to do." You know, now the Catholics don't listen to the Pope, so. And the
Yes,
Popes
but
aren't anywhere near as crazy as they used to be. So there's
yeah,
more.
because even the Pope submits to the liberal order, which is why he's saying, gay people have, their special talents and all kinds of things. But I think
Did the
that's
new
always
American
been the
Pope say that?
way. No, I think it was Pope Francis who
Francis,
said,
yeah, he was. I think he was the first guy to say, "Who am I to judge the gays?" And everybody's like, "Well, you're the Pope. What do you mean? That's what you're supposed to do." And then he said something about faggotry or something, and then the gays got upset with him. But yeah, he's very liberal. I mean, John Paul II was fairly liberal. It seemed like they were going to try to move back with Pope Benedict, and then somehow he stepped down pretty quickly. And then they went with frank, and he was extremely liberal. We'll see what this guy out of Chicago says now.
Well,
And it's
it must
amazing,
be.
all the popes were Italian until John Paul. Now they're jumping around the world. Everybody thought the next pope, I thought, was going to be African. Try to shore up their foothold in Africa, but I guess they went, maybe we better shore up America first. So they grabbed
Yes, yes. Did you see my post about King E. Michael Jones being crowned by the American Pope as
I
King
saw
of
the picture.
America?
I saw the picture. I assume that was AI generated or something, right?
Yes, yes. Well, I was quite pleased with myself about that.
No.
Yes, wouldn't that be fun? Since you've got this sort of collective desire for a monarch and an American pope, and this is what popes used to do. They would crown these European monarchs who otherwise would only be warlords. But I mean, on the question of politics and religion, I just don't see how you could even separate it. You think you can, but I just don't see. Because it's a political decision to say we can't talk about religion or we're going to ban churches. It's still, it's still linked. Even if you say you're not going to be religious, because it just wouldn't work. Because all you're doing is substituting one kind of moral system for another,
right?
Which is a political act.
We don't ban churches. We don't ban religions. I mean, I went to high school in Clearwater where the international spiritual headquarters of the Scientologists are. I know, like, the Germans have banned the Scientologists and stuff. I think maybe several of the Europeans have, but we recognize them as a religion. I mean, it's clearly just a money-making organization, but founded by a science fiction writer in the 60s or whatever.
Ron Hubbard.
Ron Hubbard. So, they're a recognized religion now. So, there's a Church of Satan in Detroit that is recognized. I assume Anton Levine's first Church of Satan in California is considered. They don't pay taxes; they're seen as a religion. So if we're going to allow these Satanists, I don't think we're going to ban any other religions. I mean, unless you're literally doing like human sacrifice. Or I will say this: they have banned snake handling. In the Appalachians, there's snake handlers. I mean, they still exist, but it's technically illegal now. I don't know what they do to you if you get bit by the snake. Sometimes you die, sometimes you don't. But I guess they could throw you in jail if you don't die.
Why? Well, if somebody wants to handle snakes, why not let them?
Well, it's like suicide. Why not let people kill themselves? That's still against the law.
Oh, right. Well, I mean, you could have a non-poisonous snake that you can handle.
Well, no, they handle poison snakes. There's no point in there being a non-poisonous snake, non-venomous. I forget the verse. I think it's in Matthew, something about, that they shall pick up serpents and drink. Some of them drink arsenic. They'll just have mason jars of arsenic and they'll drink.
Why do they do that? Do they die? That?
Well, God will protect them. That they're showing their faith. But like I said, it's a verse, I think, like in Matthew, it says they shall pick up serpents and not be harmed, and consume poison and not be harmed, something like that. It's not very widespread. It's mostly up in the hillbillies in the Appalachians. But I knew a girl from Missouri who'd been to a church where they were, they jump around with rattlesnakes and stuff. And a lot of them, their hands are knotted up because they get bit. And I guess it's not enough venom to kill them, but it messes up your joints.
Oh.
And then,
that's so crazy.
They'll go outside the church and the guy will be, oh, there's Daddy, there's Grandpa. He died from a snake bite when he's 60, and he died when he was 32 or something. But they keep doing it.
Oh, right. So you got these snake handlers in Missouri, you say?
They're mostly like in Tennessee and Kentucky, but they're up in the mountains, maybe West Virginia.
Right. Why do you think they come from West Virginia? I mean, the mountains.
It's just something that took hold up there, and they're kind of isolated, and that's in their culture.
I see. I see.
Or like the Christian Scientists. I'm not sure lately. There's been a couple of cases they've really been pressing them, but they won't like give their kids medicine. They believe you got to cure them through prayer, and so like kids with type 1 diabetes will die when they're like 4 or 5 years old because they won't give them medicine. And that's been upheld as their religious right for many years. I think attitudes might be changing a little bit when you let children die over ailments that are easily cured. They're starting to think maybe that's a bridge too far there for religious freedom. Because I think they tried some people in Philadelphia who let their little kid die.
So Christian Scientists come from the Appalachian, the mountains too? I thought that she was in California.
I thought they were mostly out in like Idaho and something, but no, I don't know if the Christian Scientists are necessarily hillbillies. I'm not sure where they.
Yes, because Vincent was quite fascinated with Christian Science and talking about Mary Baker Eddy, who
I just Googled it.
I think there was a movie made about her, wasn't there?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Mary Baker Eddy, Vincent was quite fascinated by her, and even likes their architecture because they have a particular style to their churches. But I was saying to him that it'd probably be quite easy to tell people what they already want to hear. Like, you don't have to go to doctors and mess around with, and pay hospital fees and be told things that you don't want to do. You should just pray to God. It's like, yeah, that's what I want to do. So I think if you tell people something that they not to do, something they already hate, and I think you could get quite popular. And I suppose that explains the splendor of these churches of Christian Science, which are, really quite impressive, aren't they? The Gothic and, very distinctive.
Yeah, I never looked them up, but yeah. Mary Eddy founded in 1879. So pretty new. Of course, there wasn't great science back then, So, foregoing a doctor in 1879 might not quite be the same thing as foregoing a doctor today. I mean, they couldn't cure diabetes at that time, right? They couldn't cure polio or didn't have a vaccine, obviously. Probably a lot of diseases they couldn't cure anyways. Some they might make worse if they leached you or something, bled you.
So apparently it was part of the Great Awakening. And I wonder if you'd like to tell us a few stories as an American about the Great Awakening, if you remember it from, your history lessons in class.
I do not remember the Great Awakening. You tell me, what was our Great Awakening?
I don't know.
The golden era of the robber barons?
Well, apparently it was when Protestants decided to have their revivalism. I don't know. E. Michael Jones was telling me that because he was saying that it was a peculiarly Protestant thing to do, to have these great awakenings.
Okay. Yeah. Google says the Great Awakening refers to a series of religious revivals that swept through the British colonies, primarily in the 18th century. So you're talking 1700s. So this is pre-revolution. So they probably didn't teach this. And later into the 19th century. These revivals were characterized by a renewed sense of religious enthusiasm, increased church membership, and the emergence of new denominations. First Great Awakening occurred in the 1730s and 40s. It's particularly notable impact on American Protestantism. Okay. Yeah, before my time, Claire. Sorry.
Well, wasn't history one of your favorite subjects?
Not really.
Not really?
I mean, I like it.
No, okay.
I like.
Did you have a favorite subject? Okay.
I liked algebra.
Oh, smart guy.
Well, I didn't say I was good at it. I just like, no,
Well,
I'm
I
gonna,
like the idea of being good at algebra. In fact, I'm trying to use it for one of my ideas
no, okay.
about what was it? Variables and what's the
Variables.
other one? The one that stays the same. What's
Constant.
it called? Constants,
Constant.
yes. Would you like to give us a short lesson about algebra, about
No, no,
constants
not at
and
all.
variables?
But it took me many years to figure out what a variable was. They'd always say, well, we're solving for X, it's a variable. And they never said it varies depending on the constants around it, on the information around it. That seemed like should have been lesson number one. It varies depending on the other information. But anyway, so how are you going to use algebra to solve your secular Koranism? That you're going to,
Well, I
what
was
is the
going to
variable
say,
you're solving for? What law to implement?
no, I'm just saying, because everybody's having an identity crisis, and it's like those Jews, they're supposed to know who they are, but they don't really, because they're just as confused as everyone else. So that's why everything is falling to pieces, and nobody's doing what they're supposed to do because they don't know who they are.
Right. I still don't
That's
get why
my
you think the world is falling to pieces. I think you're in the same trap as everyone else. There's this during Vietnam, there was this song, it's the end of the world or whatever. Everybody thinks it's always we're in the worst times ever. We're in the best times ever. Wars are way down. I know we get a lot of information, so we think, I remember when Obama said it's the most peaceful time on earth, and people are like, oh my God, there's a war here, there's a war there. It's like, that's nothing. I mean, compared to obviously the first two world wars, and even after that, the collapse of the empires and the colonization of Africa, there's a war in Democratic Republic of Congo. Well, guess what? They've been fighting since, the Europeans left. They were fighting before the Europeans got there. The Europeans, Leopold II killed 40 million Congolese or whatever they think. I mean, we wiped out the Native American population in less than 100 years, almost wiped them out. The Europeans, again, you go back to the 100 Years' War, the 30 Years' War. It's funny, I was watching Blogging Theology once, that Paul Williams guy, and he's like talking about secularism. He's like, well, you can kind of see why, you look at the 100 Years' War and the religious fighting. Well, start reading Islamic history. They've been fighting each other since, we said earlier, there's multiple caliphates. There was a guy one time, Yazid I, the Battle of Al-Harar, he catapulted Mecca and Medina. He actually, the Black Stone, he broke into 3 pieces. And then some Shia guy one time went to the Hajj and killed 20,000 pilgrims and stole the Black Stone and took it somewhere and tried to reroute the Hajj to under him. I mean, there's all sorts of crazy mass killings. Again, the Caliphate of Timur, he beheaded 70,000 Christians in Tikrit in 2 days. When he sacked Baghdad, he told all his men, everybody needs to bring back 2 heads. When they ran out of Christians to kill, they started killing their war booty. Some of them even killed their wives.
Oh dear, that's terrible.
Yeah, you read.
But it's subjective. It's a matter of perception, right? I mean, obviously, maybe you don't care because there's no war, in your state, and but I guess if you're a Gazan or an Iranian or even an Israeli whose apartment building has been destroyed by a hypersonic missile, you might not think the world is so peaceful. But as you, I think it's a matter of perspective.
Well, sure. Our hemisphere is much more peaceful than the other side of the world. We haven't had a serious war since, I don't know, the Civil War, maybe. But prior to that, I don't know if you ever heard of the War of the Triple Alliance. That was in South America. Paraguay lost 90% of its population. I think.
Who were they fighting?
They fought Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay. That's why it's the Triple Alliance. It was like a border dispute. I think they started out allied with Argentina. That them and Argentina were going to take on Brazil and Uruguay, and then Argentina switched sides. So the two largest countries in South America and another little one took on little bitty Paraguay. And of course, it was mostly due to disease and stuff, but caused by the war. They say Paraguay lost like 90% of its population. It was in like the 1880s, I think.
Right.
So what is Heinrich saying here?
Well, see, he has a different perception to you.
Everybody says we're on our last legs. They've been saying that. It's funny. I had a book. I think I gave it to my dad, and it was written in the early 2000s. It was written by a German guy, actually. But it was, the myth of the decline of America. I didn't realize apparently the Europeans made fun of us that our deer were too small and they would never make anything of themselves. We've had all these issues, post World War II, it was going to be our decline, I think. The fascistas just, Independence Day or whatever Trump was calling these tariff things on April 4th. Everybody's like, oh my God, America's going to collapse, I mean, we had Black Monday in 87. I remember when the market lost 10-15% of its value. That was the end of America. The 70s, we had huge inflation. Interest rates were 20%. That was the end of America. We somehow managed to bounce back usually. At some point, we will end, but it's everybody's constantly making the prediction. And then when it doesn't come true, it's like, oh, well. I don't know if you ever saw the movie The Last of Us or the HBO series The Last of Us. There's one woman, she's in this, doomsday Christian cult, and the guy's like it's the 1800s, and they're writing on the chalkboard, May 25th, 1862 will be the end of the world or whatever. And they're all in white robes, and they're just sitting there waiting for the world to end, the rapture. And it doesn't happen. The guy goes, oh, wait, it's going to be March 3rd, 1872, or whatever. People are always predicting the end of the world or the end of nations. America, I mean, other than our debt, we're as strong as ever. Our military is huge. We still have 11 aircraft carriers. We just flew planes from Missouri to Iran to bomb the bejesus. Well, wasn't much of a bombing, but had to test out those new bunker busters. Like you said, we got weight to throw around still. I mean, this guy says we're on our last leg.
Would you like a better run empire, though?
What's that?
Wouldn't you like a better run empire?
Of course. Governments are always poorly run. We can always improve on our governments.
Yes, in economy, efficiency, and, making the people feel cared for and looked after, and that, the best people are in charge. I mean, that's the ideal, isn't it? Like, yes, our ruling classes are the best in the world. They really deserve to be there because they're so, honorable and efficient and learned and ethical.
That's what you hope for.
Yeah. So, if you control the media and everything, you should be able to manage that or give an impression of, not being stupid.
Right. Well, we as Americans, at least on the Republican side, don't want the government to care for us. Right. Reagan said, was it the 7 worst words in the English language is, I'm from the government and I'm here to help, or 6 words, however many it is. We want the government to stay out of our way. Sure, we want you to build good roads and good infrastructure and enforce the law and keep law and order, but we don't want to be cared for by the government. I know. Do
you find that your state government gives you what you want, Mike?
Yeah, I like DeSantis. I think he's done a good job so far. He picked that fight with Disney for some reason. I thought that was kind of silly, but it seems to have blown over without any big, huge fanfare. Disney's going to close down and leave Florida. Like, they've got $100 billion invested in Orlando or whatever it is. They're not closing down and going anywhere. Not to mention,
what was the fight he picked with them? What was it over?
Oh, he had a bill trying to get like the gays out of kindergarten and the the drag queen library reading things or something. The left called it the "Don't Say Gay" bill. It was like about sex education and not really talking about homosexuality as if it's a normal sexual orientation or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
Disney's very pro-gay. I mean, they had a gay day back in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, a lot of people who work for Disney are creative people, as Frank
Mm-hmm.
might say, are gay and stuff. So when it was funny, so the bill came out, there's all this debate about it, and the LGBTQ people were all up in arms. And Disney didn't say anything. They didn't do anything, which is probably what they should have done. But then their own employees started pressuring them, like, we need to take a stance on this. You know, the millennials are big on corporations being ethical or having some sort of cause or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So Disney then finally came out and said, hey, we're against this bill.
Mm-hmm.
So then DeSantis turns around and they have this weird like special status because when they were built back in the 70s, I mean, there was like a lot of swampland and stuff. Actually, according to my dad, the Mormons owned most of that land. That's one of the reasons Disney bought it there, because they kind of got it from the Church of Latter-day Saints from one buyer. You know, if you start buying up all the land, it starts getting more and more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, they have this special, they're not really a county or municipal government, but they do govern themselves, and they have some sort of tax break or something. And DeSantis is like, well, we're going to take that away from you now. And then there's a whole debate about whether or not rolling them into the county would actually be more expensive to the state of Florida. That, you know, Disney runs their own fire, their own police, all that. Leave it be. They do it better than probably the government would. I'm not really sure how it all ended. It just kind of went away.
Mm-hmm. So when was the last time you were in Disneyland, Mike?
Grad night, probably. No, in college.
Mm-hmm.
So in Florida, we have what's called grad night at Disney. And so when you graduate high school, your class goes, you know, I don't know how many high schools they put in at the same night. I don't think it's the whole state. It might be over 4 or 5 nights.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I think I went in college. So probably 1990.
Right.
But if you ever want to go, let me know, Claire, because my niece is dating a guy who works for Disney. She lives in Orlando, and he can get 4 people in for free every day.
Oh, wow. I'll make sure to visit you when I want to come.
Okay. I'll go with you. I haven't been in a while, obviously.
Oh, that would be great.
I think we dropped acid and went to Disney in college.
That must have made the rides terribly scary. Or maybe
I
not.
thought it was hilarious. We were laughing the whole time.
Okay.
Mr. Frog's ride was hilarious. I think they've taken that one away now. It's a Small World. Hilarious. That's the way to do it.
What does the Mr. Frog ride do?
Oh, Mr. Toad.
Hops around?
No, it's just a little on tracks thing. I guess it was like a cartoon or something. It might have been a children's book. It was Mr. Toad. Now that I think about it, let's see what Mr. Toad's ride. It's like a kid's ride. Mr. Toad.
Oh, so not too scary.
No, it's not like the haunted house.
Mr. Toad's Wild Ride.
Yeah. Oh, they still have one in California.
Uh-huh.
But the one in Disney World, they built something better over it. Well, Disney's done a bunch of expansion in Orlando with the Harry Potter world and all this other stuff.
Oh, it's based on Kenneth Grahame's Wind in the Willows, which is an English book.
See, you English should do everything for us over here. And did I tell you I was just in Germany?
Yes, you did, and you visited the castles like that.
So interesting, you said the government to take care of you. So we were waiting to get into Ludwig's castle there. I was talking to a British chick and her Irish husband, or maybe it was the other way. Yeah, the guy was British, the chick was Irish, and then I guess it was his mother, because she was very British. But she was complaining about her fuel oil subsidy. That
the winter fuel allowance.
Yeah, the fuel allowance or whatever it is. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, we don't have subsidies over here in America. Not too much. Obviously, we have SNAPs and WIC, and we do have public housing for the poor and things like that. But us
Mhm.
Republicans want to eliminate all that.
Mhm.
But yeah, we were like, once we left, and we're like, this woman's complaining that the government's not paying for her heating, and here she is traveling the world. But I guess you guys expect to travel more than we do. We consider that to be a luxury. It's like if you can afford to, I guess Germany's not that far from the UK. It wasn't that expensive. Our flights were like $1,200 or something. But it just
Yeah,
struck us
I suppose it's always annoying when you were entitled to something and you're no longer allowed to have it.
Yeah, well, like you guys talk about pensioners, right? So that's kind of like Social Security. That's kind of like our pension program, I guess. But
Mhm.
how do pensions work in the UK? So let's say you were a coal miner back in the day or something.
Mhm.
Does the government take some of your paycheck to put into the pension program, or you just manage to live till age 65 and they give you $1,000 a month, or what?
It's a state pension, so
Right.
I'm a bit vague about it. I'm afraid, but I guess you get a state pension, and if you want a bit more, you'd be putting it into a different private pension pot.
Do you guys have
So
401ks?
I don't know what that is.
Okay, that would be a no then.
Mhm.
That's in America, those are like private pension funds. That's like companies, like my dad worked for Honeywell for 35 years. So he gets a
Mhm.
pension from them. He also
Mhm.
gets Social Security, which you
Mhm.
pay into. But a lot of the private companies are no longer setting up pension funds, especially since the 80s when the corporate raiders like raided some of the pension funds and they went away and people got real pissed. Like you said, you think you're going to get this pension from your company. Of course, the company can go under, but usually pension funds are kind of held separate from the corporation. But then
Mhm.
they started saying, well, we're not going to put money away for your retirement. You can do it yourself. And so there's two different 401ks. There's one where you do it pre-taxed. So you take a portion of your income and you set it aside and the government doesn't tax it until you take it
Mhm.
out later. That's a 401k. And then there's a 401k Roth, which you pay the taxes on first, then you put the money in. And then when you go to take the money out, you don't have to pay taxes on it. And hopefully you've made a bunch of money in the last 30 years. But
Yes. Yes. Carry on.
I was saying it all goes into the stock market generally. So
Yeah.
if you happen to retire right after the stock market takes a big hit, you might lose a bunch of your money.
Yes. Yes. I mean, what you described reminded me of going to the bookie. So it used to be the case that when you put a bet on something, they say, "Do you want to pay the tax now, or do you want to pay the tax on your winnings?"
Oh, you guys don't
And
only vig the winnings, you can pay a pre-tax on just the bet, 5% or something when you place the bet. And then if you win, you don't have to pay the 10% vig on the, here it's,
yes, it's something like that.
okay.
Yeah.
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 Here it's like if you say, all right, I put 100 on the Bucks or whatever. If they win,
Mhm.
you get $100. If they lose, you got to pay 110. But I've never heard of a pre-tax on the bet, which would be very good for the
Well,
book.
it would be on the stake.
Right.
Yes.
So I assume it would be
I'm a
less.
bit. They don't do it now, but I remember that when they used to do it.
Okay.
So
That's a good idea on their account because the bookies try to get equal bets on both sides so they can pay the winners with the losers' money and then take the vig off the winners. That's how they make their money here. If you can go ahead and just take half the vig right off the bat, you're guaranteed to win, at least on that bet. Well,
right.
I guess if the guy
But
wins the bet, you still got to pay him.
but it used to be illegal, right? Or in some states, not Nevada, you're not supposed to gamble, so it all had to be done under the counter, so to speak.
Sure.
But a, a gambling contract is still a contract, isn't it?
Hmm.
Except that you can't take the person to court and said, he's supposed to pay me, but he hasn't. And,
Right. If your
it's
drug
just,
dealer rips you off, you can't expect regress from the courts for illegal activity.
exactly. And you can't say, oh, I paid this hitman to, kill so and so, and he hasn't done it.
He didn't kill my wife like I paid him. Go get my money back. But yeah, gambling's almost legal everywhere now, at least like sports books. Here in Florida, we have a sports book, and it's through the Indians, the Hard Rock casinos here in Florida, the Seminole Indians.
Yes, it seems that the casinos are all on native reservations now.
Yeah, in lots of places. I mean, here in Tampa, I don't think they built it on the reservation per se. I'm not even sure if the Seminoles have a reservation. I think there's only about 12,000 of them in the tribe, but it's funny. Some years ago, they caught the Chief Billy. He had embezzled like $10 million or something. And they're like, well, tell you what, just give the money back and we'll leave you in charge because you've done so good for us. They had a bingo hall. They were allowed to run bingo back in the 60s and 70s into the 80s, and they were allowed to sell cigarettes untaxed. So the big smokers would always drive over to the Indians and buy all their cigarettes because cigarette taxes are very high, even before the big settlement. And then they allowed them to do slot machines. So then they did slot machines. Then they allowed them to do a poker room, but I think you could only bet like $2 or something. And then they went no limit on the poker. Then they brought in table games. So now they're full-fledged casinos. They turned around. So they had the Hard Rock running their casinos for them. So they were branded as the Hard Rock, and the Hard Rock ran them and then gave the tribe a bunch of money, some percentage of the profits, I assume, a pretty good chunk. They turned around and bought the Hard Rock out for $1 billion. So they own all the Hard Rocks in Florida now. The one in Vegas is still owned by the Hard Rock Corporation. But
is that the same people who run the Hard Rock Cafe?
Yeah, the Hard Rock Cafe guys started the casino. I don't know when, in the 80s or 90s.
Have you ever been to Mount Rushmore? I sort of think if I go to America, I'd like to see that.
Nope, never been.
Okay.
Never been to Montana. I assume that's where it is.
I think it's North Dakota, isn't it?
North Dakota, maybe. Yeah, Montana, North Dakota. They're all up there. Big sky country. There's nothing really out there but cattle. But they're building a huge Crazy Horse not far from there. But I think they've run out of money, so I think only like his legs and horse are done. But it's going to be like 10 times the size. And they had hired the same family who did the Mount Rushmore carvings.
Oh, so what are they going to do? Sorry, what's this about Crazy Horse? I'm not quite sure I understood what you were saying.
They're building a monument to Crazy Horse, like in the same mountain range.
Oh,
it's huge because Crazy Horse was an Indian.
It's an Indian,
a
Native American.
He's the guy who killed Custard in the Little Bighorn. I'm pretty sure he was in the attack on the Little Bighorn.
That was the American Civil War, or what was that? What war was this? I'm a bit vague about Custer.
That was just our western expansion. There was so we were taking over the Black Hills, which is where the Sioux are. And now there's different Sioux, the Lakota Sioux, and they're one of the big Plains Indian tribes, and we forced them off the Black Hills once we found gold in them. And in fact, I think it was in the 90s. There's a court case. We told them we'd pay them $7 million for their land, and then we never did. And then the Supreme Court ruled that we owed them like $150 million for the principal and interest, and then they wouldn't accept it. They said, "No, we want the land back." And it's like, yeah, we're not giving you Montana back. But yeah, he was He acted as a decoy in the Battle of the Little Bighorn. But I think he was known for riding into battle naked. That's why they called him Crazy Horse.
Oh.
But they're building a big statue to him. Well, I guess they got his head done and not his feet. So, the Indians were like, well, these white guys put all their dudes in the mountain. We're going to put Crazy Horse up there.
Yes, apparently Washington's the only one who's got any sort of detail apart from his head carved out. The other presidents didn't get that treatment.
Well,
and they ran out of money, didn't they?
I don't know. Well, he's got like his shirt on. I'm looking at a picture of it now. So he's got like the big lapel collar things folded over or whatever. But Teddy's got glasses on and a mustache. Lincoln's got his beard. His left ear isn't done. Yeah. Washington's right ear isn't done. He's got you can see his wig like over his left ear. I mean, Jefferson's nose and eyes look all right, but yeah, it does look undone now that I look at it. There's some, like just rock face in between Teddy and Abe. That seems like something would have been done to it. Shared Mount Rushmore and Crazy Horse tour. Yeah, so it must be pretty close. You can tour both of them for $600. Oh, no, $250. Yep, never been out to that country. I've been to Colorado and Utah. It's the out west things. I've been to Alaska a few times.
What did you think of Alaska?
Oh, Alaska's awesome. I mean, I was only there in the summer, of course, but went up on a glacier. We flew up onto a glacier. It's pretty cool.
Yes.
A lot of mountains. I was sitting in the bar one time and it started shaking. I didn't realize they have as many earthquakes as they have.
Oh, in Alaska? Oh.
Yeah, very active in earthquakes, but usually not very big ones. So anyways, back to your Muslim conquering the world ideas.
But through America.
Through America. That's
yeah.
The first people you want to...
That's my plan.
Oh, yeah. You're going to tune into the debate tonight? I guess.
Yes. I tuned in yesterday, but I saw that nothing was happening.
Yeah, I was kind of late to it. I was like, oh, shit. I went out and helped my buddy put gutters on his house, and then we hit the bar for a while. I was like, oh, I missed the debate. And I pulled it up and, got moved to today.
Do you know what the title is?
It was like...
I hope it's not Christian v. Muslim, which is so boring.
No, it was up. Oh, hang on. Let me...
Oh, you said it was idolatry, wasn't it?
Idolatry, which is more idolatrous.
Well, I think it's very sad. I mean, the fact that nobody cares means that they're really just atheists pretending to be Jews, Christians, and Muslims. That's my theory, and I'm sticking to it.
It's Christian or Muslim. Who are the idol worshippers?
And then you let a Jew decide. Ha ha ha! That would have been fun.
Well, bring in the Hindus. They're the idol experts. Did you? What was it you said? And I was you're 17104. That was the last thing I heard before I left. And you said the Muslims won't answer you. I thought you were on like EF Dawa, and the Muslim cowboy told you it's like, well, it's no longer applicable. I think was his answer.
Well,
blowing the land only meant for a little while.
Well, okay, so you get kicked out, right? You dwelt there, and then you got kicked out, and you want to go back, but it does say in the end times, you are to go back there, which suggests that if you're not there already, you should go there. But anyway, the point is not whether Jews should live there, but how they should live there, and I did read the Hamas Charter, and the Hamas Charter actually says Jews can live there, but under Sharia. So problem solved.
Right. And actually, now that you think about when you say end times, you would think the Muslims would want, excuse me, the Jews all gathered in one spot. Make it easier to kill them. There's not too many trees to be hiding behind or rocks.
Yeah.
Although now Muslims will say, well, if not, we're going to kill all the Jews, just the Jews who are fighting with the al-Dajjali, with the Antichrist.
Yeah. But the thing is, I mean, I think Muslims would know that if Jews live under Sharia, then the Gentile will not be far behind. So they can use the Jews to do their dawah for them. But they don't get it, and I'm kind of tired trying to explain it to them. Because the moment I say Zionism, you could get on the bandwagon of Zionism and make it work for you, Muslims, and it's like it doesn't compute, and then they want to ban me.
How about this?
On their channels?
Tell them that Al-Mahdi, it could be the Jewish Messiah, right? Do you know who the Al-Mahdi is?
No, it sounds like the Mahdi.
It's Mahdi. He's the Redeemer of Islam. So he's not another prophet because Muhammad's the seal of the prophets, the last prophet. But so in the end times, Jesus returns, and the Mahdi and Jesus fight the Antichrist, al-Dajjali. And then they win the battle, and then Jesus rules the Caliphate, the united earth, for like 40 years. He dies, natural causes, and then you have Judgment Day. I'm still not quite sure when Gog and Magog emerge. But anyways, you could try to tell the Muslims, convince the Jews, if they don't believe Jesus was the Messiah, that the Mahdi would be the Messiah. And by the way, there's two guys right now claiming to be the Mahdi. There's a guy in Ohio and there's a guy in London.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, have you ever heard of the 1979 Grand Mosque massacre or attack?
I probably have, but I've forgotten.
That guy claimed to be the Mahdi. So,
no, but I think according to Muslim eschatology, the Messiah won't come on his own; he will be accompanied by the Mahdi. So, so Jesus, when he returns, will be accompanied by the Mahdi, and so I think you can tell what religion somebody is. When they say the Messiah is coming, but he's not Jesus, you know they're Jewish. If you say that the Messiah is coming, Jesus isn't going to make a second coming, then that's obviously a Christian. But the Muslims will say that Jesus will be accompanied by the Mahdi.
Okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
America, where would ISIS get their weapons? Of course, they should be. Pretty sure ISIS was armed with AK-47s and stuff. They got their weapons from China and Russia. But anyway, I don't know why this guy thinks we armed ISIS. I suppose American weapons fell into their hands through our wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. But
I think that there is a theory that America arms ISIS because the idea of sending white American men coming back in body bags is not a good idea. So they thought, well, we'll just pay the Muslims to do our fighting for us and topple regimes in the Middle East that we don't like.
Sure. We did that with the Northern Alliance in Afghanistan, and the second Iraq war. We fought mostly. Well, I mean, we put a lot of boots on the ground in Iraq in 91 and in 2003. Yeah, we messed up with the first Gulf War. We should have just let Saddam take Kuwait's oil, and we could have bought it from him cheaper than probably market prices because he was bankrupt from fighting Iran. But once we did, and then the Shia rose up in the south, and Bush wouldn't back them. He said, our boys already did the heavy lifting, And then Schwarzkopf's ceasefire was just ridiculous, that he let Saddam fly armed helicopters. He said, well, of course I was going to let them fly helicopters if we bombed all the bridges. How are they going to get around? Well, you got to stipulate that they have to be unarmed. So then we ended up creating the 2 no-fly zones, protecting the Kurds in the north and the Shia in the south. And we were the pseudo-occupation force for 10 years until 9/11 happened. So then we went back in to try to finish it. And then we disbanded the army afterwards, Bremer or whatever. I mean, it's a comedy of errors. It's amazing people think America is like this. Our CIA is so smart, and we were playing this 3D level chess that we're, arming ISIS. We're creating ISIS. We created the Taliban so we could steal Afghanistan as well. Oh, we're stealing Iraq's oil. We didn't get any oil contracts out of Iraq, I don't think. I remember when the southern fields were being auctioned off. I think the Chinese and the Indonesians got all the good fields, Petrobras and somebody else, and maybe even the Russians. We didn't get any good contracts out of it. And then people were like, oh, we're waiting for the northern fields, because the Kurds are up there and they're our buddies, Then we abandoned the Kurds. We're all over the place. I don't know why people think America is this genius manipulator of the world's events. Do you think, Claire, we created ISIS? Do you think we created the Taliban? I mean, we obviously armed the Mujahideen against the Russians, but that was just to fight the Russians. Russians pull out. Who knew the Afghans were all going to just start fighting amongst themselves? Then we didn't take a side within that.
Isn't it possible to cause something to happen without meaning for it to happen? I mean, if there are lots of weapons lying around, people are just going to, acquire them and form their own gangs.
Sure. There's always, what do they call that? It's unintended consequences. Yeah. You never know when you arm somebody. I mean, look at Netanyahu's apparently arming some tribes down in Gaza. And some of the Jews are like, what are you doing? They've given a bunch of, AK-47s to non-Hamas guys to fight Hamas. They end up turning on you at some point, Look at the British colonies. We're over here as colonists. Next thing you know, we turn on the crown.
Well, I think that the whole, the Jews complain, why don't we kill them all? Why don't we just kill them all? Why leave, them here and there, and they'll grow up and, because America says no. And I think perhaps that there is, some idea of America saying, no, we have to leave the possibility of some trouble for the Jews so we can, be their knight in shining armor and, have a nice reason for looking after the Jews instead of just saying, well, we're only here for the oil and, and to keep an eye on the arrows, but it's like, oh, we're protecting the Jews. And I think that's a myth that is still, I think, important for I guess maybe historians of the future. I don't know if the narrative will survive, but it's kind of like the pre-Christian warlords of Europe, because before they were Christianized, they were just men who were good at fighting and happened to have kingdoms, and then the Catholic Church sent missionaries to them and say, would you like us to protect your divine right to rule, to give you the divine right to rule, and then we'll protect it, and then you won't just be another warlord. You'll be special and protected by God, but only if you do what we say, and there will be advantages, and you'll be considered civilized, and I can imagine these bargains being made, and sort of the Catholic Church saying, and if you don't, then we're going to convert your neighbors, and they'll be civilized, and then eventually they'll come and get you for not being Catholic.
Yeah, that's why we need to separate religion from governance. When the religious govern, they govern from their religion, and all non.
But you read the Quran. but there's so many problems with Christianity, and it's like
Hmm.
the Reformation was inevitable, because eventually, after a few generations of these, previously illiterate warlords, it's like, oh, we're civilized now. We better be able to read the Bible, and we better teach ourselves how to read, and then we have to learn Latin, and they have to learn Greek, and then we have a few ideas of our own. Oh, and hey, the Pope in Rome, he's just another man. There's nothing special about him. He's just another politician. Why don't we just sola scriptura, the whole thing? And that started the wars of the Reformation.
Sure. The Gutenberg brought down the Catholic Church with the printing press. I mean, there's no doubt about it. When it's like the Book of Mormon. At least the golden tablets, they have that hidden away still. I don't think anybody's allowed to read it other than the elders of the church, and they get to tell you what it says and get to control you. Once the masses know what's in the sacred books, they get to then start questioning them. Next thing you know, there's no God, because the sacred books are books of nonsense. Anyways, could you put up the link and see if Scully wants to come on? I'm not sure what he's asking here, but do you at
I,
least think
I
America
thought I
overthrew
did
the
do
Shaw?
that. Yes, it's already the link is already there.
Okay.
But if you're tired of talking to me, I wouldn't mind.
Well, that's all right. I wanted to defend America a little bit here, and I wanted to understand. I know, again, people think America has all these tentacles out doing all this crazy stuff, but he's like saying, do I think America overthrew the Shah? Well, we put the Shah back in power under Operation Ajax, as I know it. So why would we have then overthrown him? Because then
Well,
we
no,
wanted
no,
an Iranian
they didn't.
theocracy to counter the Sunnis. This is the whole, we prop up Iran while we claim we're against them, to have a bulwark against the Sunnis uniting, the Gulf states. The Gulf states aren't getting together anytime soon. I don't know why, with this war in Israel, Gaza, Palestine, whatever you want to call it, all the YouTubers are like, oh, the Caliphate's going to come back. Erdogan was going to invade Israel at one point. Everybody's, oh, the Turks are going to bring back the Caliphate, right? Especially in 24.
Only if they adopt Sharia, so it'll be a big deal for the Turks, and also the kingdoms. You can't be an Islamic republic if you're a kingdom, if you're a Gulf kingdom, because then you're an absolute monarch, and so it's not halal. I mean, it has to be an Islamic republic if they're going to do it properly, right? Because when you I think the problem with these Muslims is that they don't even know the difference between a republic and a monarchy. And I'm saying, if you're the absolute monarch, you're going to deal with Islamic scholars who don't agree with your interpretation of the Quran. So you're going to sign their death warrants, throw them into dungeons, and they're going to be afraid of you, and then they'll agree with a very distorted interpretation of the Quran for political purposes, and I think that is what has been happening to them, and that's why you get such crazy definitions, because after all these years of distorting their own religious principles, well, they crashed and burned. So I think it's time for them to get back to basics, and I think I'm at least capable of explaining it to Americans. So I think that's a problem. They don't even, these Muslims don't even know the difference
Right.
between a monarchy and a republic,
Well,
and they're not encouraged to discuss it.
and like you talk about monarchs, and since Ali was assassinated, I mean, it's pretty hilarious. I don't know if you know, Claire, but so the first four caliphates are called the rightly guided
The
caliphs.
rightly guided caliphs, yes.
Right. Well, three of them were assassinated. Right. The first one, Abu
Just like
Bakr,
American presidents.
was an old man and died of old age. But then, Omar takes over. He's killed by a Persian slave who didn't like his ruling because he wouldn't let him keep enough of his money. He was apparently a skilled guy who made cool stuff and sold it, and his master got 80-90% of the take. He didn't like that ruling. Uthman was killed by, I guess, what is considered the Khawarij now, because they didn't like him because he was kicking too much money to his uncle or his tribe back in Syria, Muwatta or whatever, right? So then Ali becomes the fourth caliphate, and then Aisha attacks him in the Battle of Camel because she doesn't like he's dragging his feet looking into who killed Uthman. And there was rumor that maybe Ali was involved in it, you know. He defeats her and like kicks her out of public life, but then he gets killed by another Khawarji, hit with a poison tipped sword or whatever. He was wounded and died from the poison. So then and he fought the Battle of Siffin against the governor of Syria, the Muwatta guy. And that's what the Khawarji were upset about. He ended the battle by giving concessions to the other guy. And the Khawarji thought, no, you should have wiped him out. So they kill Ali, and then Muwatta becomes the fifth caliphate, and then he makes his son the sixth, Yazid the first. And then you get the Battle of Karbala, where he kills Hussein or Hassan, one of Ali's boys, and then it's a shit show. I mean, I don't know why you think Islam is going to be this great redeemer. I get it. You're rolling it into kind of some secular Western, balance.
No, I'm just making the difference.
Thing,
okay, I'm trying to make the point. This is back to the American Republic again. There is a qualitative difference in the rights Americans have because of their constitution and the lack of rights that Europeans living under a monarchy have. I mean, this is the real difference. And you think of yourselves as, a meritocracy, and I don't think Europeans can because of their monarchy. And okay, now it's a constitutional monarchy, and really the monarch doesn't have much power. But the presence of monarchs in your society creates this confusion, because it's like, are we a republic or are we, are we a monarchy? And if the monarchy doesn't do anything, what's the point of it?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know why you guys still have a monarch. Why Canada, Australia, right?
Because we're useful to you. Because America wants the Gulf kingdoms to remain Gulf kingdoms. America wouldn't like it if all the Gulf kingdoms decided to become Gulf republics. You wouldn't like it at all. That's why you're trying to get the Shah back in Iran, because then you can say, oh, the Shah agrees with us, and the Shah represents the Iranian people. It's that kind of,
There's no doubt it's easier to deal with a monarch or a dictator than it is with a democracy. I mean, look at people dealing with us. Obama doesn't deal with the Iranians, and Trump gets elected, and he just says, screw that. Every administration has its own priorities, its own way of doing things. It's always funny when, these, Castro falls or whatever. When Castro dies, it's like, oh, he outlived, 12 presidents or whatever. Like, okay, great. That's because he's a dictator. Yeah, dictators and monarchs are, again, there's stability to them because they rule for a long time. They're easier to deal with. I agree. We don't want to turn the Gulf states into a democracy. Now, when we don't like the dictators, that's what we say. We remove Saddam. Oh, we want democracy. That clearly failed. We clearly overestimated the Iraqis. One as secularists. They were supposedly be a secular nation. We underestimated their tribalism and their hatred between the Sunnis and the Shia. And we overestimated their wanting democracy. They don't want democracy. Now that they got it, they just passed a law you can marry 9-year-olds. So in
but the
when Hamas was elected, we were like, wait a second, you're not supposed to elect these guys. We want liberal democracy, not just majority rule. Democracy isn't this great thing either. People always democracy. Well, democracy is technically just majority rule. If everybody agreed, in the South, if you had a Democratic vote in the 60s, segregation would have remained. Slavery would have remained. If you had a vote in 1860, the Southern people would have said, of course, we're keeping our slaves. So democracy has to be counterbalanced again with the Bill of Rights in America, or the UN Declaration of Human Rights, and again, our checks and balances between power is what makes us a republic. We're really not even a democracy. We're a representative republic, but anyway, splitting hairs, I guess. We don't want one guy in charge. We're big on absolute power corrupts absolutely. We don't even like it when we only got two parties, and we don't even like it generally when one party rules all three branches. Right now the Republicans have the Senate and the House, but they barely have both the House and the Senate. And midterms, they'll probably lose that. It almost always happens. Again, as a Republican, I like it when the government does very little. People, we want the government to work for us. Well, how? I mean, other than some, I guess, obviously the internet and cyber stuff has to be addressed. These are new technologies. We need some new laws to govern them. But the fewer the laws, the better. I mean, even when we were founded, Hamilton argued against the Bill of Rights. He said that, the Constitution is enough. And it's like, it's barely, hardly anything,
Well, the more complicated like that.
We don't want democracy in the Gulf states. We want to deal with the kings who we can buy off and cut good deals with. But back to steel and oil. Why do we let Aramco take all our oil stuff in Saudi Arabia? I assume they paid us for it. I don't know. I've never really looked into it, but we discovered all the oil in Saudi Arabia. In fact, I remember, I think there was a letter from wasn't King Faisal, it was his father, when when the Jews declared a state in 47, and he wrote Truman saying, if you recognize this state, we're cutting off the oil. We'll go back to being Bedouins living in the desert, drinking camel milk and eating honey. And Eisenhower wrote back to him this big flowery, like, oh, your eminence, you're so wise, blah, 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 blah. But guess what? We're recognizing Israel. And we did. And the Arabs didn't cut off the oil like they did in 73. But anyway.
Well, they would have invaded them anyway.
That may have been true, too. Old gunboat diplomacy. Like when Teddy said, I'm taking the isthmus. He broke Panama off from Colombia so we could build the canal. All he did was send some gunboats down there and said, here, guys, this is what you're doing. And they said, okay. They don't have any army,
Yes.
Certainly no navy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll probably see you at, do you want to say it in case anybody wants to join us at this idolatry debate at 11 British Summer Time, is it?
It's 11 UK time. So although it says 6 p.m. on my thing. So yeah, I guess, are you guys an hour ahead of Germany then? I thought we were 6 hours.
I think we're behind. Sorry, no. We are. We are behind.
So 11 o'clock your time is 5 hours to me. So that would make sense. 6 o'clock.
All right. And I may see you there.
So there's, I'm assuming it's going to be on both channels. There's the Solution Podcast, which is Octavia's channel. And then this guy who calls himself the FEACHAZ, the Fachiz for some reason. He's the Muslim. The other guy's the Christian. And they're going to debate which is more idolatrous, Christianity or Islam.
Yeah. So
6 p.m. Eastern time, 11 p.m. UK time.
Greenwich. Yes. And have both open in case you get timed out or disabled from posting comments.
Oh, okay. Well, I know I can't post in the Fajizes already. I'm already banned from there. So.
Right. And you annoy the Muslims by asking them about having sex with demons, is it?
Yeah, that's one of my annoying questions. That's maybe my original one. Oh, I should send you. Did I ever send you when I was on Hamza's Den, the arena?
Oh, no. Please send that to me.
That might have been my first time on. But yeah, I asked them if jinn could have sex with humans. And I'll send you the book where I find this. It's on page 22. It's a pretty funny book. It tells you about like how to deal with a snake in your house. By the way, you have to ask it to leave over 3 days. And if it doesn't leave in 3 days, then you're allowed to kill it. But you're not allowed to kill it right away. Because some guy killed a snake once. And Muhammad said, well, he may have been a believing jinn. Because, not all jinn are bad. Only the shaitan are the bad jinn. Some jinn
Do,
are good.
do,
They have free will.
right. Do snakes, are there snakes in the desert?
Apparently there's like a house snake. I saw Omar Suleiman giving a lecture once about how wise it was, because there's these little like house snakes in Arabia, and I think he might even said they're like glass snakes. We have these in Florida, at least we have what we called glass snakes, and they're not really snakes. They're legless lizards,
Mm-hmm.
because they have a real long tail, or at least, their
Mm-hmm.
asshole, their anus is way up on them.
Mm-hmm.
And if you grab the back of it, it just like breaks right off, like a lizard's tail. I guess it's a defense mechanism. Like if something strikes at it and it hits its tail, it'll just eat that, and the live part can slither away.
Yes, I know
We also call them
other
glass
lizards
snakes.
that do that. But yes, I guess you have the rattlesnake, and it's a desert dweller, isn't it? A
We have all
rattlesnake
sorts of
lives in the
rattlesnakes.
desert, doesn't it?
In Texas, yeah, there's the
Mm-hmm.
eastern diamondback rattlesnake can live in the desert. We have timberland rattlesnakes. We have pygmy rattlesnakes. We have
Mm-hmm.
rattlesnakes here in Florida that live like in the swamps and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Oh yes, so I guess they're quite versatile. Oh yes, and you have snakes that swim and live in the water.
Sure, we have water moccasins. They're also called cottonmouths. They're black, but their mouths are real white.
Mm-hmm.
We used to catch those sometimes.
Yes. Do you get alligators walking into your house
No,
as a Floridian?
we're pretty urban here, but I can go to the park across the street and see an alligator if you want. Want me to go take a picture of an alligator for you?
Okay.
You go to the golf courses. There's usually alligators in the ponds.
Right. I thought it was quite cute that ICE have been portrayed as alligators who support Trump.
Oh, it's probably
There
because
was a rap song, and they were dancing in that animated thing.
well, have you heard of alligator Alcatraz?
How does it go?
Okay, so down south in the Everglades, right? That's the big swamp in Florida down in the south that we drained much of it, but there's still a good amount of it there. There's it was like a Air Force training airport. And I don't know how long it's been abandoned, probably 20, 30 years or something, but it's pretty much in the middle, kind of in the middle of the Everglades, or deep in the Everglades. And so I guess it's in Broward County. The sheriff's like, hey, why don't we turn this into a holding place for illegals? It'd be real easy. We just put up some chain link fence. If they get out, they're going to be surrounded by swamp. If they want to try to get through the alligators, and now of course we have Burmese pythons down there that got introduced that are considered invasive. So, you should come do the python roundup every year. They do a big thing where everybody goes out in the Everglades and tries to catch as many pythons as they can.
Mm-hmm.
But so anyways, they've tagged it, they've named it Alligator Alcatraz.
Right.
And Trump was just there visiting, and so they built it in like 3 weeks. They got tents, and apparently they're going to be air conditioned and stuff. I don't know about the mosquitoes. That could be pretty bad. I hope they're going to give them mosquito tents, but
right.
So I guess that's why they're now calling ICE alligators. The liberals are all besides themselves over this. This is horrible.
Yeah.
It's like the concentration camps. See, he's a Nazi.
Yes. Okay. Well, I look forward to seeing you later at Solutions Podcast and Fudgies or something like that.
Yep, however you spell that.
Yes.
There you go. There's an article from PBS for you if you so choose.
What's that about?
Alligator Alcatraz.
Oh yes. In the private chat.
That should be from the liberal side of things.
Oh yes.
PBS is government funded but very liberal.
Okay. I'll have a look at that.
See you later, Claire.
Okay. Take care, Mike. Bye.